We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown, Marshall and Western Kentucky.
Intercepted by Key, and Key has one man and beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
Here comes Talik Keaton to the sideline midfield. He's to the 40, gets a block, and he is gone! Touchdown, Marshall!
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, brought to you by Homefield, premium vintage collegiate apparel, the perfect blend of comfort and style. Really simple to get one of these sweet t-shirts or sweatshirts or hoodies, Trace. Go to homefieldapparel.com. You can search the list of teams there, but if you don't see yours, just go to the search bar and type it in. Type in Marshall, see the sweet herd gear they have. Type in Western Kentucky, see the sweet toppers gear they have. Follow them on Twitter at Homefield APPARL. Homefield Apparel, wear one for the team. Trace, awesome week of games as far as herd fans are concerned. Some things to be happy about if you're a Toppers fan, but not with the results of the game against Louisville. We'll get into that a little bit later once Steven joins the show. But right now, it's just me and Trace. Find us on Twitter at MoonshineTD, at MSTD_podcast. And, of course, find the podcast anywhere you can get a podcast. There's no need to name them. If you listen to a podcast somewhere, search for the show. I'd like to point out that we are a 5-star rated podcast on iTunes, which is pretty freaking awesome. So appreciate everybody that's going and rating the show, leaving a review for other folks. I mean, we've got some pretty nice reviews, not a whole lot, 2 or 3, but really positive reviews. So you guys like what we're doing. We appreciate that. Please subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. And if you get a second, man, pop over to iTunes and leave us a nice 5-star rating and, give us a little bit of a review. We appreciate that. So, like I said, Trace is here with me right now. We're going to talk the herd. Marshall welcomed in historic rival Ohio University to the Joan C. Edwards Stadium this past weekend. The 60th all-time meeting between the two schools. Another edition of the Battle for the Bell. And the herd comes away with a victory, 33-31 really was a street fight of a football game for much of that football game. Nice crowd there at the Joan too, 27,323 according to ESPN. So that's a really good crowd for the herd. Let's talk about it, Trace. Give me your thoughts. We'll go over those 4 big indicators, and then I'll talk about a few things. But I got to know right off the bat, you got to be feeling good about the Marshall effort against Ohio. So just lay it on me, man. I know you got some good things to say.
Yeah, this was really, in my opinion, a fantastic game. I thought it was an absolute great game from start to finish. It was compelling. It was close the whole way. Marshall never led by more than 10. Ohio only led one time in the game, and that was early to mid fourth quarter. And that only lasted for about 2.5 minutes. So Marshall got the lead back. They responded well, which I'll touch on more here later with individual grades and so forth. But no, this game was a great game. Really solid crowd. For a night game with really nice weather against, a rival, I would expect it probably, I would have hoped at least for 30,000, but 27 is pretty good. That's not bad. And, for the first time in, honestly, for a while, the crowd actually got loud, later in the game. I noticed, because it seems like the last however many home games, last year or two, the crowds really haven't been that loud. There hasn't been a lot to get invested in, really. I don't know, but the crowd got into this one. It was a great game, and I dubbed it as a must-win, and thankfully Marshall got the win, because you don't want to be 1-2 with Cincinnati looming. That's a bad omen If they would have been 1-2, they could have been staring at 1-3 right in the face. So this is a big win, huge to finally get the bell back. You know, they hadn't had it since 2014 when they blew them out that year. Ohio won the 2015 meeting, so it was great to see them get the bell back. You know, how much the players embraced it after the game was really cool. It shows how much the rivalry means to them. And like I said in the preview episode, I think it's Marshall's overall best rivalry, but it's not, the Moonshine Throwdown is the best current and modern rivalry. Obviously, we'll beat that horse to the death now there. But Ohio, yeah, I mean, as far as all time, kind of, you know, obviously more historical and just more to go on overall. It's probably the best rivalry, and it showed in this game. This was probably the best battle for the bell game I've seen. Probably, I'd have to think about it. There's a couple games that come to mind being real close competitive games, but this one probably tops them all. So it was a phenomenal game and a great way to head into this bye week.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to knock Ohio and Marshall as a rivalry because it is. I mean, if Ohio was in the Conference USA, I mean, I don't know if we'd have much of a leg to stand on trying to build this thing because, you know, you're talking about two teams that have played 10 times as many times as Western and Marshall have played. So I got a lot of respect for historic rivals. I don't knock Western and Middle Tennessee. I mean, if you've been playing for 100 years, that means something. But, you know, there's a spot for us in the grand scheme of college football rivalries as well, and that's been proven, and it continues to get bigger and bigger every day and every season. So, you know, we get more and more fans, more and more followers, more and more people get jacked up about the game. I mean, you know, it is what it is. So, you know, I think we've done a really good job of establishing ourselves with these two fan bases in, you know, the 5 years or 6 years that have been trying to do this. So hats off to the Herd. I mean, that was a good win. And you said it, that, you know, Ohio, well, actually, Marshall was in control of the game, at least from the scoreboard standpoint for most of the game. But, you know, Ohio goes up and they go up late. And I'm thinking, man, is Marshall going to lead this game all the way to the end and then let it slip away at home? And I actually tweeted after Ohio went up that it was gut check time for the Herd. This is where they needed to dig deep and, you know, show me something and show the fans and show themselves something, really. And they did exactly that, Trace. They took the ball over, you know, with and what you say, they got the ball back and went right down the field and scored the go-ahead touchdown. Nice long pass to Xavier Gaines. Really nice play. Can't say enough about that guy. That looks like it's going to be a really, really good pick for you, calling it as the breakout player for the 2019 season if his season keeps going on the trajectory it's on. But the really big gut check thing for me, and I tweeted that this was really big time football, something you need to see at some point during a season to give you an indication of what type of football team you have, is, you know, Marshall took over the ball with 5 minutes and 42 seconds left in the game. And I thought that they needed, you know, I didn't think they were going to be able to run the clock out. I mean, that's just not really how their offense is built. You know, they're not a 6 minute type, you know, run the clock out thing. I thought, all right, they need to go down the field and they need to get some points on the board. Even if that's just a field goal, they need to try to force Ohio to have to score a touchdown with very little time left on the clock. And I'll be daggone if they didn't go 10 plays all the way down the field into the red zone, all the way down to the 2-yard line. And then they just decide to kneel on the ball and run the clock out. And so I got no qualms with that. I mean, that was that's what's big time right there. You needed to end the game. They took control of the ball with nearly 6 minutes left, and they did not give the ball back up, and they just cruised on to a victory. As a matter of fact, on that drive, they didn't even see a third down. So they took over the ball at their own 28-yard line, drove all the way down to the 2-yard line, and then Ohio wasn't able to stop the clock anymore, and they just decided to kneel on the ball. Got no problem with that. So that's a big-time gut check football. I tweeted that almost verbatim when it happened, but that is exactly what you want to see if you're a fan of the Herd, because that tells you they know how to close out a game. And it also tells you that they can go down late and have the ability to stay within themselves, stay focused, and go back and get a lead back late in the fourth quarter or midway through the fourth quarter. Two big things that are really nice indicators if you're a Herd fan. So Let's talk about those 4 indicators, those 4 big things: total yards, time of possession, first downs, and turnovers. Marshall across the board, Trace. Total yards, 511 to 438 in favor of the Herd. Time of possession, 33 minutes, 49 seconds for the Herd, 26 minutes, 11 seconds for the Bobcats. First downs, 24 to 17. And turnovers, the Herd does not turn the ball over. How about that? And then they come out and get one big turnover on a special teams play that was freaking marvelous. Stephen Gilmore, how about it? Punching the ball out from the Ohio returner, giving the ball right back to the Herd there. That was a clutch play. So, look, Herd runs it up, 27 points in the first half, and you're thinking, wow, they're going to hang 50 on the Bobcats. This is looking good. All of a sudden, some things happen. Brendan Knox doesn't come out for the second half of the game. Xavier Gaines has a kind of what are you doing moment there when he drops a surefire touchdown pass early in the second half, and ultimately the Herd only puts 6 more points up on the board in the whole second half and still manages to escape with a 33-31 victory. Leading stat getters for the Herd this week. Leading passer, of course, Isaiah Green, 17 out of 28, 206 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brendan Knox, the leading rusher, even though he only played in the first half, 16 carries, 133 yards, and a touchdown. My man was cruising. He was definitely on his way to 2 bills, but got a little dinged up and wasn't able to get there. Sheldon Evans comes in as RB2 and takes over for Brendan Knox in the second half. 17 carries, 77 yards for Evans. I mean, that's some good game experience right there. It's a guy you're definitely going to need as the season goes along. And then let's talk about Xavier Gaines. We mentioned him before. 3 carries, 52 yards, and a touchdown for Xavier Gaines. Also 3 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. And, of course, he did have that really big touchdown reception drop. But other than that, he was the star of the game for sure. Defensively, it's Devontae Beckett, 11 tackles, 2 solo, half a tackle for loss, and 2 quarterback hurries. And Najee Johnson, 8 tackles, 3 of those solo. Now, look, we can't talk about Ohio without talking about Nathan Rourke and how he absolutely is every bit as good as he was billed to be. I mean, he goes 15-25 for 215 yards, 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions. And then he is the leading rusher for Ohio as well. 9 carries, 118 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, he absolutely sliced and smoked that Herd defense for a 72-yard scamper at one point in the game. So, hey, props to Nathan Rourke. Ohio's got a good one. And they are potentially, legitimately, for the first time in a long time, able to win the MAC. I mean, they've had good teams, and they've just been overshadowed by the Toledos or, the Western Michigans or whatever. But I think Ohio might be the best the MAC's got to offer this year. So we said going in that this would be a measuring stick game for the Herd, more so than going against Boise, way more so than going against VMI. And it was. They went punch for punch, and whoever got the last punch won, and it just happened to be the Herd. So you got to feel good about that. You got to feel good about what the team looks like, feels like. So let's talk about grades. I know this is like your favorite part of the whole daggone wrap up. So you get to get a little bit of candidness going on. You kind of let it all flow out there for a minute. So let's talk about quarterback play. Let's start it off.
Well, starting off with the quarterback play, it was infinitely better than it was against Boise State. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. I'm going to give Isaiah Green an A this week. I thought he played really well. 61% completion percentage, 206 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no fumbles, no turnovers of any kind. That's huge for him. He had an 85.4 QBR. That's really high. And he also, on the ground, had 6 carries for 50 yards. And he had 2 or 3 huge carries on that final drive where they milked the clock out. And, so that was really big on his part to be able to run it that effectively at times. I was saying that hopefully he would rebound from the Boise game, and he did. He rebounded in a pretty big way. I thought he played really well. Probably his best game of the year, given the fact that it's against a legit conference title contending team in a rivalry situation. I mean, he probably had a little better stats against VMI, but that's VMI. This is Ohio. This is a lot different animal. So Isaiah Green played really well. I don't think you can give him anything but an A. I thought he really impressed.
Yeah, and I'd like to put an asterisk beside those stats, right? Because I keep going back to that big drop, and I don't mean to pick on Gaines at all. But if Isaiah Green goes 18 of 28 instead of 17 of 28, you might be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 260 or 270 yards. That was a long pass play that was dropped, and there was going to be some yaks after the catch. So, just that one play would have inflated those stats to the point where you're like, wow, Green had a really good game instead of a solid game. Because at that point, you're looking at 18 of 28, maybe 260 and 3 touchdowns. What a difference one play makes. But you're right. That was a great game by Isaiah Green. Nice bounce back effort in what I called a very pedestrian effort against Boise State. And I'll stand by that. Nobody will argue that. But excellent bounce back effort by Isaiah Green for sure. Offensively as a whole, how about that?
Yeah, I actually wrote down a little different grade initially, but since you brought up the drop point, it actually slightly dropped the grade a little bit. But it's not just from that one play. But offense still gets an A for me this week. Offense was really good. I mean, you put up 33 points. That in itself is a good day. But when you look at, some more details, 511 total yards, 7.4 yards per pass. They had 206 yards passing, 305 yards rushing was huge. 6.5 yards per carry. Only had 2 penalties. I thought that was really big. They played clean. That's kind of unlike Marshall because a lot of times they go and have 7, 8, 9 penalties each game. Also, no turnovers. I mean, that's huge. If you have no turnovers, you're more than likely going to win the game. And then the most impressive drive of the game probably was that final drive where they ran out nearly 6 minutes of game time in a situation where you have to keep the ball to keep it out of Ohio's hands you're not giving them a chance to score. But the only reason I don't give it an A+ like I initially wrote down is there were actually 3 big drops because at the end of the first half, Green threw it to Talik Keaton to the back corner of the end zone, and he dropped it. Now, the pass was a little hard to catch. It was maybe a little too far out in front of him, but he still should have caught the ball. The next play, he threw a really good pass down the seam right to Armani Levias, who was right at the goal line. He dropped it. That would have been a tough catch, too, but it still should be caught. And then, of course, the Xavier Gaines drop was the only bad thing he did the entire game. Green absolutely chucking the ball about 50 yards off his back foot. I mean, that was a fantastic throw. And, he just didn't come up with it. So if you take in those 3 drops right there, Green could have had a huge day. That's really the only bad thing throughout the offense was just a few drops. But other than that, they played about as well as you could have hoped for. I mean, the second half got a little rocky, but a lot of that can be attributed to Brendan Knox being out. So offense has to get an A for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're talking about halftime adjustments where you're – star runner now, it doesn't come back out, and essentially you have a guy who's seeing his first significant game time action
right
out of ever. So he's coming in, and just a few days earlier he was RB3 on the depth chart, and now he's RB1 in the second half of a rivalry game that, oh, by the way, is pretty tight. So he got some hard yards. Yeah, he still averaged 4.5 a carry. I mean, really good effort. I mean, a really, really good effort for Sheldon Evans. You get a few more game reps under his belt, a little bit of more comfortability, shake the jitters off. It's never going to be your first time in the game anymore. So, hey, it's time to settle in and see what he can do now. Maybe, he and Brendan Knox, if Knox turns out to be ultimately okay, will be the new 1-2 punch for the Herd. But yeah, look, I'm also going to say receivers are always going to drop passes, but it's going to be pretty rare that you drop 3 potential touchdown passes in the same game. So that, that just doesn't happen. We might be harping on that a little bit more had the score been flip-flopped in the other direction, but as it is, that, just because it's 33-31 in the favor of the Herd, those are not huge things, but I bet you there'll be huge things on film day. I'll tell you that. So how about defensively?
Yeah, I mean, this is by far the worst defensive performance of the year, but it wasn't that they played that bad. But I'm going to go C+ for the defense. I mean, it was just, honestly, I feel like it was more just the style of how the game was going. It was kind of a lot more of a shootout and high-scoring offensive game than I expected it would be. So, I mean, the style of play kind of lended itself to both teams having a lot of yards and points and stuff. But, I mean, if you look at the defense a little closer, they allowed 31 points, gave up 438 total yards, 215 passing yards. But the shocking part for me was 223 rushing yards allowed. and they allowed their first 100-yard rusher since the Southern Miss game in 2017, and it was to a quarterback. That's how great Nathan Rourke played in this game. I mean, that guy is absolutely phenomenal. I'm completely sold on him as being the best quarterback in the MAC now, for sure. But a couple other stats defensively, they got 0 sacks. They could not get him down. He was so elusive and slippery in the pocket. It looks like probably 4 or 5 times they had him down. They couldn't get him down.
They had him a few times.
Oh, man. I mean, I was getting so frustrated, but then you just got to realize that's just a great quarterback play. I mean, that's not even the defense doing anything wrong necessarily. But even though the defense got lit up at times, they made stops when they need to. You know, they got them off the field, a couple big-time plays. And they were also put in a couple bad situations. Like the special teams kind of put them in a little bit of a bind, and they're there in the first half after a punt, and then a pretty spotty punt coverage, and Ohio ran it all the way back to about the 40 or the 30. So a couple bad spots here and there that led to some points. But, I mean, defense was slightly above average, we'll say, so C+.
Yeah, C+. I mean, look, kickoff coverage was pretty abysmal. Ohio lived around the 40 all of the first half. So, it is what it is, but that defense was bending. And, it was cause for concern for a while. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, hey, one freak run, 70-some yards equals a touchdown. But let me point out that they gave up 438 yards to Ohio. The week before, they gave 437 yards to Boise, but only 14 points. So this bend but don't break looked like it started to run out a little bit because they were starting to break in the sense that they were giving up more points. I mean, you can't give up 31 points every week and expect to win a whole lot of ball games. But, I look for Marshall to shore that up a little bit. Doc takes a lot of pride in special teams, which we're getting ready to talk about. So you can imagine that kick coverage will get a little bit better. So speaking of special teams, what you got on the special teams grade this week?
Yeah, special teams, I'll go with a B-. I almost went with a C+, but then I thought, well, that one turnover they forced was the only turnover in the entire game, so I feel like that needs to be taken into consideration and bump the grade up a little bit. But if you look at some other things, I mean, they had a missed extra point. That was bad. And I was sitting there when I saw that, I was like, watch Ohio get a field goal, win 34-33. I was just, expecting the worst there. And the kickoff coverage and even the punt coverage was so lackluster. I mean, it was really rough, honestly. And I said last year that kickoff coverage is probably what Marshall's the best at as a team and probably the most sound at. And, it's not just this game. They've been a little spotty with that this whole season. So I figure they're going to get that shirt up. I mean, they worked too much on that. Lefevre, though, had a really good day punting, 41.4 yards per punt, had a long of 54, pinned him deep at least a couple of times I can think of. One time, I think it was Chris Jackson that stopped it before it went in the end zone. Really nice plays there. 2 of 2 on field goals. That was Rohrwasser's first field goal attempt of the year, and he made both of them, so that was good. Even though the extra point mishap, it kind of takes that down a little bit. And like I said, they also forced the only turnover of the game with the strip on the Ohio punt return, and I think that led to 3 points, I think it was, for Marshall. So you could say that could have won in the game because, they won by 2. So, special teams – outside of the kick coverage and the punt coverage, actually played pretty well. The extra point was missed, wasn't good either. But B- seems fair for that.
Yeah, the missed extra point is just one of those, man, we got to get that right because it was a non-factor in the result of the game. So how about coaching? I'm interested to see where you go with this. This coaching grade. I am interested, I must say.
Yeah, I was impressed with the coaching this week. I think it was a nice bounce back. I'm going to go A-. And the only reason I got the A-, I'll get into that more here in a minute, but looking at some of the positives, the play calling got much more creative in this game. You saw some plays, some different things that thrown in that they hadn't done yet. They did a really unique reverse type play there in the first half. I think it was either to Willie Johnson or Xavier Gaines, and it got a good chunk of yards. That was a really nice play. And, of course, they got Gaines involved by having him in the Wildcat and lining him up all over the field. They did some nice creative things. And, and then that one touchdown where they had about, I don't even know what to call it, where they had the lineman lined up as a receiver or whatever, and that scored a touchdown. That was really creative. So Cramsey, I'll give him a lot of credit because they threw out some different plays that they hadn't ran yet, and I didn't expect. They had it was more of an aggressive approach in the first half. It got pretty conservative at times in the second half. But a lot of that was probably because Brendan Knox was out, so they weren't quite confident in Sheldon Evans to go out there and get a 25 carry game or whatever. So I get that, but it was a little bit aggravating just because it was working so well with what they were doing in the first half, and they kind of vanillaed it up in the second half, but ended up winning the game, so it didn't matter. But Gaines was used well, like I said. That was really impressive to see them getting him involved more and more. And then they came out fast. I mean, they came out immediately on the first drive. Marshall got the ball to start the game. They came out fast. They scored in barely over 2 minutes. So you got to like that. So really the only reason I don't give the coaching just a regular A or even an A+ is because I didn't really like some of the conservative play calling they had there in the second half after Knox was out. But I guess on one hand I can understand it. On the other hand, it was like, well, let's maybe let Isaiah Green air it out a little bit more because he was playing well. But, I mean, coaching, you can't really be upset with it. You got to go A-. I think, well, you don't have to go A-, but I'm going A-. I think that's fair.
Yeah. The offense did become a little bit stagnant. I believe I tweeted that during the game, and it was cause for concern because – they weren't moving the ball and the defense was bending, and you thought, all right, man, this might let Ohio back in the game. But you're right. I like the creativity that we saw. If you go back and you look at that play you're talking about where offensive lineman Will Ulmer was lined up in the slot, that was the touchdown pass to tight end Devin Miller. So go back and look at that play, and I want you to do nothing but keep your eyes on Will Ulmer, because I saw it again today and it is awesome. I mean, he basically takes like a step like he's going to run a route and then stops and jumps up and starts waving his arms like, I'm open. And this poor defender freezes just long enough to look at him like, what the heck is, and that was enough to get Miller past him. And that led to the touchdown. So great job, Will Ulmer, selling the play, man. I love that. How about overall this week for the Herd?
Yep, overall I'm going to go with a B+, and it was a really solid performance overall. It's a big win over a legit team from the MAC, I believe. I mean, I just don't see how that team doesn't have a chance to win the MAC. They were picked to win it in the preseason, and it shows why. They have talent. They have a phenomenal quarterback. He kind of, I always think of certain Ohio quarterbacks like Tyler Tettleton, how much damage he did to Marshall just made me so mad. But this guy, Nathan Warwick, I'm glad that Marshall only has to play him once because he is legit. He's for real. I think he's better than Tettleton. He's a better runner. I think he probably throws a better ball. I mean, as scrappy and tough as Tettleton was, and he had a lot of success against Marshall, I think Warwick's better. So I'm glad it's only 1 year that they have to play him. But, I mean, nothing but respect for Ohio. That's what I said. It's like that's a team, whenever Marshall plays Ohio, I look forward or hope for a win and feel great about a win over Ohio as much or more than any team Marshall plays. I mean, that's because it's a great rivalry. You got to have respect for Ohio and Frank Solich and that program and how consistent they usually always are. It's a nice kind of mutual respect rivalry. It's not like a diehard, like I hate you kind of rivalry. There's respect there, and it showed after the game and everything. And Frank Solich has always good things to say about Marshall and Doc Holliday and everything. So really good game, a really, really good game. It was really entertaining. A lot of good moments in it, dramatic. You like to see those dramatic, close games, except when your team loses, then you don't like to see it. But so thankfully Marshall pulled it out and won those types of games, and that's a good sign for the rest of the season that they can pull out games like that. So great game. I'm going to go B+ overall.
Yeah, good call, man. I mean, the win's a win, 2-1 on the season. At best, at worst, Marshall's going to come out of the out-of-conference 2-2. At best, we're looking at 3-1. You get a Cincinnati win, and you're really riding some momentum into conference play. One note there about Nathan Warwick. Yeah, Marshall won't see him again, but apparently his younger brother is a freshman at Ohio right now. So, depending on I don't know if Marshall will ever see him play, but, man, if he's anything like his brother, they don't want to see him play. No. So here's the big question. And then we'll move on. What do we know after the Herd? What do we know about the Herd after 3 weeks?
Well, I think now we know that Marshall's capable of winning a shootout type of game. Now, this wasn't one of those 45-40, 67-66 games or anything, but this was a game that Marshall, over the last couple of years, they would have had problems winning because Ohio had a lot of success offensively. They put up quite a few points, but Marshall, to their credit, was able to put up a couple more points. And like sometimes, the last couple of years, Marshall's been sitting there at 25, 26 points a game on the year, and that's just not going to win you games unless your defense is playing tremendous. The defense didn't play that tremendous in this game, so that meant that put a lot more pressure on Marshall's offense to produce, and that was without Brendan Knox in the second half, who had an absolutely monster first half running the ball. So it shows that they can win a shootout-style game, kind of similar to what you would see in a shootout. I mean, it wasn't that high scoring, but there was a lot of offense in that game, and I think that's a really good sign for the rest of the season, because sometimes Marshall's had problems with that, not being able to keep up with teams offensively. So hopefully they can do that now. It looks like Isaiah Green can answer the challenge when a game is in that situation. So I like the outlook for that possibly going forward. Hopefully they can keep that. Hopefully it doesn't matter. Hopefully they don't get in very many shootouts. But if it ends up in a shootout type of a game, it looks like Marshall has the capability to win now. And that was a big question mark over the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, importantly, maybe more, I don't know if it's more importantly, but we know that Marshall can close out a game against a good team.
That too.
One way or another. They can come back and get the lead back, and they can keep the ball without ever giving it back if they need to. So, and we also know that Isaiah Green is a much better quarterback when he has a plethora of his weapons available. Richardson was back for this game. Gamage was back for this game. We still have yet to see Obi Obialo on the field. Hoping that comes back. Maybe he'll come back after the bye week. It'd be nice to have him for Cincinnati. But you can see what a difference what it makes for Isaiah Green to have guys that he can chuck the ball up to, and what flexibility it allows Tim Cramsey to utilize Xavier Gaines when there are other weapons on the field. So those are several things we know about the Herd. So look, we don't have a game to preview this week. Bye week is undefeated, so there's no reason to preview bye week. About all you can say is we hope everybody that's dinged up gets undinged up, and then that the Herd is as close to 100% for Cincinnati. So we're going to take this opportunity, this segment of time that we would normally preview the week's opponent. And since we're roughly at the quarter post of the season, Trace is going to do a little bit of a state of the Herd address, so to speak. He's going to talk about where he sees the team now, and kind of what they need to do, or whatever to achieve the goals that he had predicted in the preseason. So I'm kind of interested. We haven't talked about this. I don't know what he's going to say. I am interested to hear it as well. So, Trace, let's talk about the state of the Herd.
Well, I think you got to have a pretty good taste in your mouth as a Marshall fan after 3 games. I mean, 2-1 start. The VMI game went exactly as you expected. The Boise State game, they were extremely competitive in that game against a really good top 25 team that could very well represent the Group of 5 in the New Year's Six Bowl. So they went toe-to-toe with Boise State. There was never any doubt whether or not they could keep up with them, although the offense, like I've said numerous times, failed them miserably in that game, at least in the second half. But you got to like how competitive they were. And then back home against Ohio, a really good MAC team, long-time rival, they went there and got it done. And they won a really close game. They were trailing in the fourth quarter. They responded well. Every time Ohio punched, Marshall punched back bigger. So that was a really good way to win that game. And I think you got to like how the rest of the season looking. I mean, right now I would go on record probably saying Marshall's the best team in Conference USA right now. Now that could change very quickly. But I mean, looking at some of the rest of the East, FIU has looked pretty bad so far. They're 1-2, and their only win is against I think it was New Hampshire, and they only won by like 13 points or something. They kind of had to have a crazy play there to win that game or whatever. So, and then looking at Western, I mean, they've been pretty competitive so far, but I'm not that intimidated by them. No offense. FAU, they're probably pretty. I think FAU could be a contender, but like I'm not on the road there. That's going to be tough. Charlotte's looked pretty good so far. They put up a lot of points offensively, but I don't know if they'll be able to, sustain that. I mean, it's early in the season, and then ODU's ODU, and I don't even know who else in the East. Middle Tennessee, they've looked kind of bad, so not much. I mean, honestly, I think the East will run through Huntington this year, and I think that's getting more proven as we go along. I don't know if that FIU game in the season finale is going to mean quite as much because, quite frankly, FIU looks like they might be struggling to just get 6 wins. I don't think that game at the end of the year, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it's looking now more like that might be a game FIU has to win just to get to a bowl game, let alone win the division. So but there's a lot of season to play, so they could turn it around. But right now, I think Marshall's in firm control to potentially win the East Division. They look like the best team in the East, arguably the best team in Conference USA. You know, Southern Miss has looked pretty good so far. North Texas has looked decent at times, but you know the potential they have with a great quarterback. And UAB, they've looked good against a pretty weak schedule so far. So I don't know about the West, really what to expect out of there. But Marshall looks like I think they should win the East, and I don't think there's any excuse at all if they don't win the East this year. The injury bug has kind of bit them pretty hard in the first few games. I'll say that. So this bye week's coming at a really good time. So hopefully they can get Obialo back. Hopefully Knox is back. A couple other guys. So I think that you have to have a good taste in your mouth after 3 games. I mean, if they would have won the Boise State game, you wouldn't just have a good taste. You would have an amazing taste in your mouth if they'd be 3-0 right now. But even 2-1 is a good start. And their only loss is to a top 25 team in a competitive game. So can't be too upset about that overall in a vacuum. So I think you got to be pretty happy with the first 3 games, and I think that is a good sign for what's to come.
So what do we need to see from the Herd to live up to your preseason expectation? I mean, what are they doing right? What are they not doing so well from your viewpoint to get to where you think they need to be to host and ultimately win a conference championship this year?
Well, they're going to have consistent offensive play. I mean, that's just been – I can't say that any more times. I feel like that just has to be there. I mean, the offense has to be consistent. You can't go from scoring 7 points one week to scoring 33 the next, then putting up 10, then putting up 30. You can't have that. You got to be consistent. It's got to be more production out of the offense. I think that's really – the offense and the quarterback play have been the main culprits, in my opinion, as to why Marshall didn't have a chance to win the East the last 2 years. I mean, I shouldn't say didn't have a chance, but I think that's the reason why they didn't win the East the last 2 years, because they were every bit as good, in my opinion, as any team in the East the last 2 years. But they came up short because of a couple of bad losses, close losses here and there that they just couldn't pull out. So offense has to get better. There's no doubt about that. It has to stay consistent. I mean, it played really well against Ohio, but it can't fall off from there. It's got to be more consistent. Special teams have been pretty good so far this year, but I'd like to see better kickoff coverage, punt coverage teams. Well, I don't think that's going to be much of an issue. I've been happy with the punting. You know, Rohrwasser hasn't attempted many field goals this year, but he's made his only 2 attempts. So special teams I'm not too worried about. And then the defense I'm not worried about at all, even though Ohio got quite a bit of yardage and points on them, but I don't think the defense is going to fall off at all. I think they have too many playmakers. You know, Chris Jackson's back now. He played this last game after missing the Boise game. Secondary's looking pretty good. Pitts is back there, and a couple other guys that I'm excited to see. They've been stopping the run really well, except this Ohio game. Nathan Rourke, freaking guy, he just kept running all over him. But defense, I'm like how it looks. I really like the way that they're set up right now. Hopefully, though, they don't get ahead of themselves, and hopefully units don't start falling off. But in my opinion, the biggest key for Marshall to reach a conference championship level is sustained, consistent offensive play. That is the biggest key, and that involves turnovers too. You can't have a bunch of turnovers. Turnovers have cost Marshall majorly over the last few years too. So all wrapped up in one: offense, production, turnovers. Can't have it.
I think you're right on the money, to be honest with you. There's got to be a baseline level of points per game, and it can't fluctuate by 20 every game. It can't do that. This Herd team has to be a minimum of a 26, 27 as you average it out point per game team. And honestly, as if a number of the weapons are there for Green at his disposal week in and week out, you'll probably see that. Yeah. Because like we said, there's not every game you're not going to drop 3 potential touchdown passes. It's not going to happen. So you could have seen that this week. This could have been a 40 or 50 point game, but the defense is great. They're giving up a lot of yards right now. And this week they gave up a lot of points, but you're right. Ohio was living in and around midfield there for a lot of the game. So what are you going to do? You're a couple of first downs away, 3 or 4 first downs away, and you're in striking distance. So, if they're holding Ohio back at the 20, 25-yard line, maybe they don't score as many points, but, it is what it is. As long as the W's add up, as long as you get another one in the left column, that's ultimately all that matters. I will say, look, I got to go back to some of your points about these Conference USA East teams. I don't know if Charlotte's for real, but they are definitely my surprise team in the East. They hung really, really tough with Appy State. They put a lot of points up on Appy State, and Appy's generally pretty daggone good. So, like you said, we'll see if they can keep it up, but they're the surprise team. That's one you better take seriously. I think another thing that Marshall needs to continue to do to meet your preseason expectation is continue to take it one game at a time. You can tell that's been apparent this season. VMI is who they thought they were, a terrible team. So, it's the opener. Who else are you going to focus on? But you can tell by the effort they put forth in Boise on that short week, flying across country, that they were focused on that game, and they didn't look ahead to Ohio. And now Ohio comes around, and you can tell they're not looking ahead 2 weeks, and Cincinnati's coming in. They were focused on that game. So far, so good in that area. I mean, if you're a Herd fan, 2-1, you got to be pretty happy, even though, of course, who wouldn't want to be undefeated? I mean, if Marshall goes and beats Boise, they might be cracking the also receiving votes in the top 25 right now.
Well, it would be.
That's not where it's at. But you go beat Cincinnati, and maybe you're going to start getting that. You rattle off 6-1, 7-1, 8-1. They're going to have a hard time not considering the Herd, for some kind of top 25 type ranking. But anyway, state of the Herd is strong, wouldn't you say?
I would say strong, yeah.
All right, good. So hang with us on the other side of this break. Steven's going to get in here. We're going to talk about this Western Kentucky Hilltoppers team. We're going to relive that Louisville game in Nashville. I got some feelings on that game. I know Steven's got some feelings on that game. And we're going to look ahead. Well, Toppers happen to be on a bye this week as well, but we're going to look ahead to the rest of the season. He's going to give you a State of the Toppers address, just like Trace just did. It's a little bit of breaking news this week as we found out quarterback Stephen Duncan will be out for, quote, several weeks, according to Coach Tyson Helton. So we'll see what the quarterback situation is. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast.
The bell will come back to Huntington.
And there is the bell. It's been in possession in Athens, Ohio since 2015. And Isaiah Green will be keeping it in Huntington, West Virginia for now. A 33-31 win for Marshall. We expected intensity, and both these two teams delivered. As the Battle of the Bell, the 2019 edition, goes to the Marshall Thundering Herd.
All right, we're back. Steven's joined the fray. We're going to recap this Western Kentucky and Louisville game. Turned out to be a 38-21 Louisville victory. Of course, the game played at Nissan Stadium in Nashville. In front of a crowd, Steve, 22,665, which is really disappointing. Just further drives home the fact, in my opinion, and I'm sure in your opinion, that this game absolutely should have been played in Bowling Green because, if one of the arguments was the stadium's not big enough to hold the crowd that'll go to this game, boy, was that a big fabrication, because this would have been a perfect sellout crowd basically at the Houch. So I know you'll have some thoughts about that here in a minute, but let me run down, just some general things, and then I'll get your take. Toppers dropped to 1-2, 1-0 in the conference, still in first place in the Conference USA East. As far as the game goes, to me, the Toppers hung really tough. They just could not seem to sustain the flurry that they got laid on them in the second quarter. That was really the difference in the game. Toppers succumbed to a 24-point Louisville second quarter, 17 unanswered points, and at halftime the score was 31-7. Now, after, in the second half, it turned out to be a 14-7 ball game in the favor of Western Kentucky, and the Toppers again knock another quarterback out of the game. Starting quarterback for Louisville, Malik Cunningham, instead of Mr. Pass, started the game. Mr. Pass was hurt, so Toppers ended up knocking Malik Cunningham out of the game. So that's like 3 quarterbacks in basically a game and a half. So we're driving home that fact that this Toppers defense is pretty dangerous as far as getting licks on the quarterback goes. So talk to me about the game. I know you were there, and then, we'll talk about some stats and some other stuff like that, and then we'll see how the rest of this recap goes. So talk to me about being there, the atmosphere, just the whole nine.
Yeah, I mean, me and drove down and got there, a little under an hour before kickoff and met up with some usual suspects for some tailgating. The Joes, the Keys, and the Wits welcomed us to their tailgating area, and we hung out with them for a little bit and had a few drinks, and then went into the game. It was hot, man. I mean, it was 3 o'clock kickoff. It was hot outside. When we get into the Titan Stadium, basically that time of the day, one side of the stadium's in the shade, the other side's in the complete sun. And, the crowd was pretty thin at kickoff. I know from what I heard, it looked bad on TV, but the media side is in the sun side, and it looked terrible there because nobody wanted to sit in the sun. It was hot. Everybody moved over to behind the home bench where the Toppers were, and it filled in pretty nicely. But like you said, the crowd was announced just over Houchin's capacity. So, definitely could have been a home game. Definitely, I even tweeted that during the game. It should have been a home game, should have been in Bowling Green. Would have been a great atmosphere, whereas in Nashville it was just kind of dull compared to the last time when we played UK, which was a evening kickoff, if I recall correctly, and a little bit cooler weather. I don't remember just the day. But the game itself, I mean, it just seemed like their speed on offense was just too much for us, and there's a problem. Their mobile quarterback, the option plays, and they're us, and then they were hitting big wide receiver gains as we were trying to hone in on those running backs. So they've obviously improved in their first year under Satterfield, and I really thought the Toppers would hang in a little better than what we did. Some of the play calling was a little bit befuddling to me. It seems like we'd get into 3rd and long situations, and we're handing the ball off or running a quarterback, even if it wasn't designed that way. Just play calling still just kind of, I don't know, just didn't make sense to me, and I know other people kind of felt the same way. But we did hang tough that second quarter, kind of put it away and kind of put it out of reach for us. But, the guys hung in there. They didn't quit. They played the whole game. And I think that just goes to speak for the team isn't as what they were UCA, and they're probably not going to be, as good on both sides of the ball as they were against FIU. But I think somewhere in the middle, will still win plenty of conference. The defense is pretty tough, and the offense just needs to get more consistent. That's all it is. They need to finish drives. They've got more points on the board to win ball games in this conference, and that's, it's going to take repetitions, and there might be some losses in there, but I think they can also win some games.
Well, it was, I don't know. We talked about, wide receiver Tutu Atwell was one of the guys that we said was one of the players on this Louisville squad to look out for, and he lived up to the billing. 4 catches, 141 yards, and 3 of them went for touchdown. So Mr. Atwell had a game, that's for sure. And he caught touchdown passes from both the quarterbacks that played for Louisville. So it's not like it was just Cunningham was in the zone to Atwell. The backup, actually, which would have been a third stringer, actually went in there and got himself a touchdown as well. And some other things that we talked about that the Toppers needed to do to win this game was, keep Gage Walker going. And for the most part, Louisville was able to keep him in check. We'll talk about stats here in a minute, but let's talk about those 4 indicators. Again, total yards, time of possession, first downs, and turnovers. Total yardage, first out of the gate, all 4 in the favor of Louisville. Total yardage, 415 to 287. Time of possession, fairly close, 31 minutes, 11 seconds for Louisville, 28 minutes, 49 seconds for the Tops. First downs, Louisville 21, Toppers 14, and then turnovers, Western 2, Louisville 1. So, didn't really, outside of time of possession, it's not as competitive as you would like it to be in those other 3 indicators, but it was really, that second quarter, everything else, it looked like the Toppers were able to go kind of blow for blow and hang in there or just hang around. But the second quarter just did them in. So, it is what it is. Leading stat getters for the Tops, Stephen Duncan, 25 out of 47. 47 pass attempts, 245 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions, but he did have a lost fumble. Gage Walker, 14 carries, only 41 yards. But, hey, the rest of the team, 9 carries for 1 yard. And then a few bright spots there from the receiving corps. How about that tight end Josh Simon? 1 catch, 77 yards. That went for a touchdown. That was a really nice play. Somebody just forgot to cover Mr. Simon, boy, and they made him pay for that. Lucky Jackson, 4 receptions, 40 yards. Also a lost fumble and a dropped touchdown pass. Not something you want to see from the senior. Pretty rough game for Lucky. Well, hopefully he gets a bounce-back game here against UAB coming up. And then Ja'Cour Pearson, 5 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Defensively, a lot of guys had a lot of stats because, Louisville ran a lot of plays. Devin Key leading the way along with D'Angelo Malone, both 10 tackles, both 4 of those solo. Devin Key gets himself a fumble recovery, whereas Malone gets half a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hurry. Kyle Bailey, another solid game, 9 tackles, 5 solo, and a tackle for loss. Coco Darden, 9 tackles, 4 solo. Antoine Kincaid, 8 tackles, 5 solo. And then Juwan Jones, 6 tackles, 2 solo, 1.5 sacks, and 2.5 tackles for loss. These defensive ends continue to put up solid numbers no matter the opponent. So I don't know where we go from here. It did come out. I talked about it in the tease right before the break that the news has now come out that Stephen Duncan is injured and will miss, quote, several weeks, according to head coach Tyson Helton. And, he says it's an open competition here, but we know that's kind of sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. A week and a half essentially is not enough time to have a true open competition. But I guess it's just, I don't know what you call that. You and I'm not going to speak for you, but I'd like to think that it's Ty Story's job to lose because, he's been the only other QB to see game action. But, Shanley has had a lot of game experience. And you've still got to figure out a way to get Kavaris Thomas in the game, in my opinion. So let's talk about that before we talk about these grades, since this is some new news, and I'm kind of intrigued to see what your thoughts are about the quarterback situation. Stephen Duncan had a pretty solid game. Even though he had to drop back and throw it 47 times, a little bit over 50% passing, that's not something that you'd like to see. You'd like to see, of course, a completion percentage a little higher, but hey, 3 touchdowns, no picks, but yes, a lost fumble. So kind of, improving a little bit every week. And now all of a sudden he's injured and who knows exactly how much time he'll miss. So where do you go from here if you're, the coach and trying to figure out a new quarterback?
Yeah. I've been pretty squarely on the Duncan train, since last year. Wanted him to kind of be the guy to run us out every game. But when we got the grad transfer Story from Arkansas, I kind of just imagined that there was no way that he wasn't going to start coming into this year. I thought he'd win the competition. It would be our starter game one. Now Duncan, has started the year, has kind of had ups and downs, thrown some picks. He's a little bit wild sometimes, but he's gotten better, like you said. But still kind of in the back of my mind, I've just kind of wonder, what would this fifth-year senior, how would he look on the field? He's got some SEC experience. So while it's unfortunate that Duncan got injured, I still am curious as to how Story will do getting some official game reps. So, hopefully it leads to more, positive and good results, more wins. I think he had plenty of reps in spring ball to get a rapport with the receivers and learn the offense. And, I know he had a good spring game. I mean, he's done some good things in practice, and he has plenty of big game experience from the SEC. So, hopefully that translates into some success here. We had pretty good success bringing Mike White over from USF, where he didn't, exactly put up phenomenal numbers. He came here, and of course, we had a quarterback whisper at the time, but a second chance for a guy could definitely possibly be a good thing for him. So I'm curious to see what Mr. Story brings to the table. And luckily he's got an off week here to prepare and get ready and get kind of a game plan set in stone for him leading into UAB next week.
So, of course, it sounds to me like you think it's going to be Ty Story getting the nod, which is kind of what I thought too. I mean, like-minded as you are, you don't bring on I'll say you don't. You don't, as the player, transfer somewhere with 1 year of eligibility remaining to not play. Otherwise, you go somewhere where you're going to play. So, I'm with you. I think he's going to be the one that gets the nod this week. A couple things going for him. You mentioned them. I don't think there's an atmosphere that Story is going to play in that's going to be bigger than any atmosphere he's already played in coming out of the SEC. And number two, well, actually three. Number two, you're right. You got a bye week here, so you get essentially 2 weeks to prepare. And then number three, first game out of the gate for you is a home game. So, those three things, I mean, it can't align any better unless you were getting a really, really sorry opponent coming into play as well. Now, unfortunately, you do get UAB, defending conference champion. But, they haven't been world beaters this year. So you got to like their chances, the Toppers' chances of putting together a solid game plan and getting a win at home. So let's talk about the last thing we're going to talk about from this Louisville game is, of course, we've got to get some grades in there. And then we've got a little something just like we did for the herd, where I'm going to get your take on the state of the tops since we are roughly a quarter of the way through the season. We'll talk about that here in a second. Let's talk about grades. How about the quarterback play against Louisville?
Yeah, for the quarterback, I'm going to give Duncan a C. Like you said, he had a lot of dropbacks, a lot of passes, and was above 50%, but not much. No interceptions, which is a step in the right direction against what was a pretty good defense for U of L. So, you talked about some of the problems Lucky Jackson had, the fumble, which I never got to really see a replay for, but I thought it was not a fumble. I thought it was an incomplete pass. And then the drop pass by Lucky in the end zone that should have been a touchdown. I mean, I think he had some good moments. He made better decisions. Could have got a little bit more help from his wide receivers. Just all in all, it's just an average game, though. I mean, you'd like to see, north of 60% to really kind of, put us in a better chance to win. More completions, obviously more yards, hopefully more points. So just to see average performance, nothing bad against him. That fumble is unfortunate, but 3 touchdowns, no interceptions was positive in my eyes, but still average as far as completion percentage. And he still had a lot of guts. I mean, he got hurt in the third quarter and finished the game out. So, kid's definitely a trooper. He's a fighter. But still would like to see a little bit more on the completion side to get a higher grade.
Yeah. You got to think that if you're going to drop back and pass it almost 50 times, you've got to be well north of 300 yards by the time you're finished with the game. But, it is what it is. Basically took care of the ball from a passing standpoint. And, of course, we talked about the fumble several times, and that just is what it is. But at least he's thrown it to his guys, and that's something you definitely want to keep seeing. So how about offensively as a whole for the Tops?
Yeah, kind of the same, just to see. I mean, and some of it is play calling, and I'm not coming on here being the one questioning play calling, but I know people watching at the game and people at home are just kind of scratching our heads at point about what we were calling in certain down and distance situations. So, but from what we executed, I give us a C. When you don't put up more points than we did, just an average performance. I thought we had a chance to win, come in as 10-point underdogs and really kind of got away from us there before halftime. So just an average performance. Didn't see a lot of big, bright spots, but definitely saw still some improvements, and hopefully against conference opponents that'll continue to get better, and we'll find some victories.
I mean, yeah, I'm with you. See, fair game. I mean, a very uncharacteristic performance from your senior wide receiving leader. So I look for that to be the habit. This is going to be more the exception. So, it's just an unfortunate time for that to have happened in a game. Granted, it wasn't out of conference game, so really no harm, no foul. But it's just not something that you want to see from one of your upperclassmen, one of your leaders. So that stuff will get cleaned up. Topper's already showing that they're competitive in conference. So, it's nowhere to go but up from here. But we'll see how it goes with a new quarterback at the helm, and we'll see how that jives. One thing we got to talk about. I gotta ask you a question before we move on to defensive side. I want to talk about Kavaris Thomas for a second, because he's just physically he's gifted in such a way that you want to try to get the guy on the field. And he's been there for a couple of years now, and I don't understand how you can't work the guy into the game plan somehow, especially how we are now seeing the versatility of the way that Marshall is using Xavier Gaines, who also came out of high school as a dual threat quarterback, who's a big bodied guy, who's now lining up in the Wildcat, so to speak, even though Gaines was a quarterback and is now playing tight end. And we see in this game against Ohio, he gets a rushing touchdown on the ground. That was a chunk play. And he gets a touchdown through the air. That was a chunk play. So I'm asking, don't you think that the Toppers should be working him in a similar fashion? I mean, somehow, isn't he athletically gifted enough to where you've got to get the guy on the field? We're coming into game 4 now.
Yeah, I don't know. Just since last year, and there was a lot of social media banter from certain individuals that wanted him on the field more. And then, honestly, I almost expected him to transfer in the offseason. I think I was pretty open about that quarterback room being full coming into this year. And then we kept adding people to it. I wasn't going to be surprised to see him leave, strictly over playing time and opportunities. And as it's setting up now, I mean, he's behind a junior that's been starting, and now a graduate transfer senior that's going to start. And you have to assume the junior will come back next year and be the proverbial starter next year. So he's looking at sitting out this year and possibly next year not playing, basically. So like you said, yeah, I mean, we need a way to get him on the field, whether it's, packages, drives, or whether it's, a position change, if that's something he's open to and can do. I mean, the switch for Xavier Gaines has obviously worked out. He's an athletic guy, big body, and is producing for them. Somebody of that skill, that caliber, the highest rated recruit you've ever signed out of high school. I think you want to utilize him and get him on the field. Otherwise, next time you have high rated recruits looking at you and then see that they never saw the field, I think other coaches are going to use that against you, especially if he ends up leaving the school. I don't think that's going to help out for future recruiting. But, yeah, I definitely agree that they've got to find a way to get him somehow on the field. I don't want it to be through injury. I want it to be using his total package of God-given athletic ability. There has to be something on that field that he can do and contribute to what we're trying to get done.
Yeah, there's got to be some way. And, unfortunately the red shirt has already been used. He's red shirt freshman. So, if he does, which we don't want to see this, but you brought it up, we have to talk about it. If you do see a transfer, then he will have to sit, and lose a year. You're closing in on that magical week 4, fourth game, which is basically like a new transfer type deadline to secure that red shirt. But I can't. I would have maybe a slightly different opinion if the Toppers were undefeated and they were winning easily, and everything was kind of like a well-oiled machine. But this team's still trying to find ways to win, still trying to find somewhat of an identity of who they are. Or, are they a traditional running team that sprinkles in the pass, or are we going to be a pass-heavy team that sprinkles in the run? Or, what are we? And you've got athletes that are standing there. Who am I to second-guess coaches? But I'm just saying, with the success we're seeing across the field from this rivalry with Xavier Gaines, you've basically got the same kind of guy on your roster that's not being utilized. So, like to see Mr. Thomas get in the game. I think the fans would like to see what he could potentially bring to the table. So let's move on and talk about defense. How about the defensive effort here against Louisville? 3 out of 4 quarters ain't bad, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. You could just tell there was some mismatch problems. Their quarterback was very athletic. Their running back, Tutu Atwell, receiving the ball. They had some playmakers that presented some matchup problems for us. That being said, we did still, make some good plays. Got good defensive pressure from our D-line. So still, saw some positives, but defensively, I had to go with the C as well. That big second quarter outburst being most of that. There was a few big plays that we gave up, people being out of position or missing tackles. So, I'd like to see a little bit more, but I still think it's a strength that will continue to get better. And I'm sure they're going to take away a lot of things that they can learn from this game and continue to get better.
Yeah. So, very average across the board so far. You're right on the money. How about special teams?
Yeah, not a lot happening there. No, big field flipping plays, no big returns. The punter had a pretty good game. I think there was one kick that he sent a little bit out of bounds short that, we would like to get more distance on. But, just an average game there. Well, we did have an onside kick, right?
Yep.
But, yeah. But other than that, just kind of an average game. But, definitely big props to Corey Munson. I'll give him an A. Otherwise, I would have said average. So I'll go with the B just to blend that average. I'll give us a B on special teams because we didn't do anything to shoot ourselves in the foot. So I'll give us a B in the special teams department.
Yeah, Haggerty still averaged over 41 yards. He did have a long of 63. It's just the one little slight shank kind of brought it down a little bit. But, yeah, you're right. Munson, 3 of 3 on extra points, didn't attempt a field goal. No huge returns, whether through kickoff or punt, and no turnovers. So how about coaching?
Yeah, this one's the one that I'm going to go C-, and it's only because, like I mentioned, the play calling in a few situations, I just didn't understand the situations we were putting ourselves in. It seemed like we were behind the chains all game long instead of being aggressive. And that's, I know that's something that sometimes the game flow dictates, sometimes it might just be, execution or just the defense winning the battle and putting you in that position. But I definitely would like to see more aggressive play calling, more down the field play calling, which I don't feel like happened a lot. The touchdown to Simon, was a quick hit seam route that went a long way. The touchdown to Pearson was a drag route. Nothing really deep down the field, which is kind of what the people were expecting to see and want to see. So a C-, and, open up the playbook and bust out some deep throws. We got a guy with an arm back there. Let him throw the ball. Yeah,
I'm with you. I mean, especially if you're going to do things like attempt onside kicks, if that's going to be a thing and you're going to be running or, gambling in that fashion, then you might as well keep going all out and try to get big plays off of those extra possessions as it is. But, C-, yeah, it is what it is. So overall, looking like a very average run-of-the-mill game for the Toppers.
Yeah, definitely a C. I mean, I guess admittedly I can say I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit too much and had too much expectations when I predicted a win. But I still felt pretty good about how our team played. We just had one real bad quarter that opened it up, and that allowed Louisville to kind of coast in the second half and, play to protect themselves. But we still got to go out there and execute and hopefully get better and learn from it and put some points on the board. So definitely just a C overall average. Got out there, relatively healthy except for Duncan. But I still kind of like our options there at quarterback. I hate to see somebody get injured, but I'm still very curious to see what happens in the near future.
All right, so the big question, after 3 games, after 3 weeks, what do we know? What do we know about the Toppers after 3 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, just what I said earlier. I mean, I still think our best football is in front of us. I still think we'll win some games. I don't think it's a 3-win season. Going to a bowl game will be tough given the rest of the schedule that we have, but I definitely think we can steal some victories. I don't think you'll see the wheels fall off like we did against UCA. I don't think we'll give away a game like that in that fashion. I think we'll be able to lean our defense a little bit more, hopefully while our offense continues to develop. So, hopefully it's just a team in the first system that's still learning and still getting better. And, there's going to be some slip-ups along the way, but hopefully we can all kind of see progress overall in the body of work. And we're not going to be as bad as the UCA kind of the train wreck at the end of that game. I think we're going to continue to get better and steal some wins like we did against FIU. I think we're going to be all right.
Well, look, this isn't a preview episode of UAB, but I did look ahead there as we were talking about this and just wanted to throw it out there that there's a tremendous amount of respect for Western Kentucky in that game, at least according to the ESPN Power Index, because as of right now, we're over a week out from the game, but unless there's a drastic change, the Toppers are a 70.3 chance to win the game at home. So, there's still some respect there. And if you want to go even further out, following UAB is Old Dominion, and the Toppers are a 75% chance to win that game on the road. So evidently ESPN likes the Toppers, even though the scoreboard at the moment really isn't favoring them. So, it is what it is. This was a tough one. Wanted to see a better effort all the way around. Would definitely have liked to have gotten the win, if not kept it a little bit closer than 17, but it is what it is. Let's chalk this one up and move along. So now we don't have a game to preview. Like I said, UAB is not until next week. We've got a bye we're coming on. So we had a little extra time, and we decided to talk about the state of the Toppers. And Trace did that with the herd, as you guys have already heard, or if you're just a Topper exclusive listener, you skipped past. So we're going to talk about the state of the Tops, where they are now, what they can do to meet Steven's preseason expectations, and basically anything else he wants to talk about as far as the state of this team goes. So, Steve, how about the state of the Tops?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all, probably pretty close to the record we might have had us pegged at. If you did kind of a preseason win-loss prediction for us, but maybe you picked the games wrong. I know I certainly did. That said, I mean, the product on the field's better. UCA started out great, ended terribly. FIU was just a solid performance defensively, was dominant. And then, U of L kind of hit and miss in both departments, but, offense and defensively. So I think we'll land in the middle. Like I've said, I'm going to keep banging that drum. I think we're going to be in the middle somewhere. We're going to be kind of an average team. But average can sneak out some victories. The quarterback situation is obviously kind of still up in the air like it was before the season began. Going to be very interested to see what the presumed starter, Ty Story, will bring to the table. If he has SEC talent, there's no telling what he might be able to do in Conference USA. So I still think we have a very talented group of playmakers, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends that can make some plays if he can put them in position and deliver some good balls to them. And then defensively, I think the D-line just needs to keep doing what they're doing, crank up the pressure, keep quarterbacks uncomfortable. And hopefully the secondary will kind of do their part on the back end of keeping plays in front of them. And, hopefully allow our offense to continue to grow and get just better in tune with the system and finishing drives. So, it's really just all about finishing drives. When we're not putting up points on the board, it gets real tough to win. And I think it kind of puts our team at a disadvantage when we want to be up tempo, we want to be big play. We're going to have to score more than 21, 24 points a game, eventually. And, I hope, and I think we'll continue to see that growth. I still think we're going to pick off a couple more wins that you wouldn't predict, or we might not be favored in, similar to the FIU win on the road. I think a couple of those are going to happen. Maybe we play spoiler for someone kind of coming down the line for a conference race. So I still think we're in good hands. I think we're fine. I like Kelton a lot. There's going to be questions no matter who you put as the coach. There's going to be play calling questions, but I'm glad I'm not on the sideline doing it as my job, because that's a very, very scrutinized position, and every loss is kind of on his shoulders, and he kind of knows that, and he steps up to the mic and handles it with grace. So, but I still think he's a good guy, good coach, and going to lead us to definitely a better direction than where we've been the last couple of years.
So outside of just saying, well, we got to win 5 more games, what are the Toppers? What do you think they need to do really to meet your preseason expectation, which was basically get that bowl bid?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming into the season, I predicted a little bit bigger season for Jock Sloan. I'd like to see him get some more deep balls down the field. I think I didn't expect a big season from Gage Walker.
Well, honestly,
I think
who did? Honestly,
I didn't see that coming. I thought a running back would have a good big season. I thought it would be somebody else that's no longer with us.
Right.
But that being said, I think Gage Walker is very, very talented, and I think we need to ride him quite a bit. I've been super impressed by Josh Simon. Every time he's checked into the game, it seems like he's made a big play. And just a little footnote here, when he checked into the game against Louisville, I mean, I'm sitting beside my wife, he checks in, I said, oh, we're definitely throwing a seam route pass to Josh Simon. This ball is going to number 6 right now. Of course, we hike the ball, throw the ball to him, it's 7-yard touchdown. I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back, but I was just like, we're putting him in. He's getting the ball. I did. Maybe Louisville hadn't seen enough tape to know that, but I knew that was happening. And then even the Ja'Cour Pearson touchdown, he lined up in the slot, ran out pretty much out to the goal line, and then ran a drag route. I did the same thing. I said, we're going to Ja'Cour here. He's going to come across the field and use his speed. So I just think we need to put the ball in our playmakers' hands, and some of the plays where we're 3rd and long and we're handing the ball off, where I know that does happen, and you do sometimes sneak a first down out of there, but sometimes it just seems like the safe play, and you're trying not to avoid a turnover where you can kick the ball and try to pin them and then try to flip the field, leaning on your defense. I think just be aggressive. I mean, that's the Brom era was known for a lot of throws over the middle, screen plays that kind of broke out into big gains, and then just cherry picking when you went over the top and just kind of opened up the defense and surprised them. And then dink and dunk slashes across the middle to kind of just loosen the defense up for that next big hitter. So I would love to see just a little bit more versatility, opening it up, throwing it, winding up. At least, if you're going to lose, lose going big. That's kind of what we were told and what we want to see. Let's see that happen.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, a little bit more creativity, a little bit more versatility, I think is definitely needed, because right now it's pretty vanilla. The offense is, nothing is wowing you outside of, the occasional onside kick. Offensively, though, nothing's blowing me away. There's been, a trick play here and there, but, this team needs to, I guess it appears like they need to learn how to dominate a game. Now, of course, in order to do that, you kind of have to play from ahead to show your dominance, but you can still have that mentality even though you may be trailing. But it's going to be a tough road to hoe if you drop to 1-3. Then all of a sudden you're having to go 5 and whatever to finish the season out, 5-2 to finish the season out to get the bowl eligibility, and that's not ideal. There are a lot of tougher conference opponents that you'll be trying to steal wins from in those final 6 or 7 games. But, I don't know. People seem to forget that, we're only 3 games into this head coach's era, and it's unfair to second guess every single decision that doesn't result in a positive play. If this were year 3 and you were seeing the same things instead of game 3, yeah, maybe you can ask a few more questions. But, he's filling the job out, and I'm with you. It's a lot easier to sit here with a set of headphones on in front of a microphone and make calls or second guess things than standing on the sideline when it's happening in real time. Now, we get paid a hell of a lot less to do what we do on this show, but, it's an awful lot of fun. The pressure is much lower. So, the state of the tops is, I hate to keep saying very much in flux, but there's a lot of fluidity going on. There's still a lot of identity finding going on, especially now with the search for, the answer at quarterback due to injury. So, all right, it's not all doom and gloom. There are plenty of playmakers. Let's just see a little bit more creativity. Defense is legit and for real. Yeah, they're giving up yardage. Yeah, they're giving up points, but I don't think you're going to see that as you get into conference play. As you get into conference play. So these defensive ends are legitimate. The whole defensive line is legitimate. You've got playmakers in the secondary, hard hitters at the linebacking core. I mean, it's there. The foundation is there. So the offense is just playing catch up to the defense right now. And, oftentimes you have that in a team. One side of the ball is playing catch up to the other. All right, Trace, you can start us off this week with some final thoughts, and then we'll get the heck out of here.
Yeah, I mean, the more I think about this Ohio rivalry a little bit more, the more I want to see this game happen more frequently. I mean, that's just a great game to have. I mean, the schools are so close to each other. They're so intertwined over the years. They've had so many kind of similar success, and they kind of just had a lot of similarities over the years. And it shows at times. I mean, look at this game, how great, how competitive it was, how close it was. That's how a rivalry game should be. And I think that's a big – in today's landscape of college football, so many rivalries kind of get pushed to the wayside because they just – it's just hard to keep them going with the scheduling and everything. But I think this series needs to continue, and thankfully it is continuing in a relatively smaller scale, I guess. It's not like a 7, 8, 9, 10-game series. But they have one more game next year, of course, in Athens. They have another home and home in 2025 and 2027, I believe. So, but I would like to see this game happen more frequently because both teams have a lot of respect for each other. Both programs, coaches, fan bases even have respect for each other to an extent, it seems like. So, this is a rivalry I'd like to see continue. I mean, it's not like it's Marshall and Western Kentucky where they're in the same conference so they can play every year, but they need to try to keep it going more, in my opinion, because that's always a great game when Marshall plays Ohio. Even if Marshall loses, it's usually always, good crowds at both stadiums, a lot of hype around it. They're playing for the bell, which is a factor for these players because they like to, get those trophies and all that kind of stuff. So I would like to see this game continue moving forward outside of just the whatever games they have lined up. So I really think it'd be a good game to have more frequently, more consistently. So that's kind of where I am with that because Marshall doesn't have a lot of rivalries right now. Only ones they have are Western Kentucky and Ohio, and that's really it. So they need to kind of keep those rivalry games intact. So we'll see if they can keep it going from here.
Yeah, this has got to be my least favorite part of the dollar grab of college football in the last decade plus, and that's the loss of so many good rivalry games across the entire country. I mean, there are teams that played for decades and decades and decades and decades that just don't play anymore. And it's a real shame because, those are the games that tie generations of fans of a school together. So now you look at, and I'm just going to use Marshall, for example. You've got a whole section of the fan base that is Mac era Marshall fans. And they love playing Ohio and they love playing Miami, and they get hyped for that. And they understand that, this used to be big. These used to decide divisions, and then you got the students that are like, oh, okay, Ohio's our rival. Okay, that's cool. And they just don't really necessarily get it as much because ultimately this game doesn't decide anything for them. It's nice to see the players take stock in it and want to bring that trophy home. And, that's cool. That is really cool. But that's why it's so important to have a rival in your conference that you currently play in. And it's got to be one within your division. So you're guaranteed an annual game. So, I'm going to step down off my soapbox, but the loss of rivalry games is one of the crying shames of the college football landscape, of which there are millions right now. There's so much wrong with college football, but we all still love it and we can't get enough of it.
Absolutely.
But, losing games like Marshall, Ohio every year is a sad state of affairs. Look, we don't even like to talk about the Mountaineers on here, but Pitt and WVU not playing annually is a travesty.
Joke.
It's a travesty. No matter what you think about either of those teams, the fact that game isn't played is a travesty. Over 100 all-time meetings or something like that. I mean, that's crazy. All for a few bucks. Well, a few $million, but still, it's just something that needs fixed. And hopefully, when the giant bubble finally bursts, and something's got to be fixed, and some things maybe go back to a little bit more regionally friendly type, geographically friendly stuff. We'll see the return of some of those games. But until then, all we can do is embrace those opportunities when they come along to face a rival. Luckily for us, we got one every single year. So the rest of you guys can just sit back and be envious. And anyway, all right, Steve, final thoughts?
Yeah, Joe, just kind of picking back up on where we were just a minute ago, I think that's been part of the frustration is with the offense is we've seen so many playmakers, especially so many of them that we didn't expect, from Gage Walker, Fortenberry's had a good season, Josh Simons had a good season, Ja'Cour Pearson, Lucky Jackson, even Jock Sloan's had a few big catches. So, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. We just want to see them put to use a little bit more often. So definitely, final thoughts are, just continue to open up the playbook. Hopefully, maybe even new blood at quarterback. We might find that, that next talent that kind of just surprises and wows us and say, hey, this was there the whole time. This could be kind of a turning point, and, we might find a hidden gem that, we knew was there all along, but he didn't win the job. That was, admittedly 50-50 coming out of, spring and fall. So, I'm very curious, and I had been kind of secretly curious as to what he might hold as far as talent and what his capabilities are. So I'm still optimistic and excited to see what's going to happen, for the last 9 games of the season.
You might be right, man. The guy might be there. The key to the season may be getting ready to make his first start for the Tops. And look, in retrospect, I think Helton made the right move. You got to go with the guy. If it's a 50-50 toss-up at quarterback, you got to go with the kid who has been on campus, who the crowd knows, who the fans know, who the defense knows, and see if he's the answer straight out of the gate. Now, it's unfortunate. Duncan got hurt. And, we don't know how that trajectory of progression would have continued had he not, it would not have missed some time, but that's the game of football. Injuries happen, and, time is often missed. Now it's next man up, which is a favorite coaching phrase that just about everyone likes to use in time of injury, but that's what it is. Next man up. So let's see if Ty Story or Davis Shanley or whoever else gets the start at quarterback is the answer to, inject a little life into this Topper offense and maybe, catch him up a little bit closer to that defense. So what else can you say? We appreciate you guys tuning in. Of course, find the show on iHeartRadio, Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at MoonshineTD, at MSTD_podcast. We appreciate you guys subscribing. We appreciate you downloading and listening. Hey, if you get a second, shoot over to iTunes and give us a review. Rate the show. It helps us out. It helps us get out there to more people who just may happen to stumble upon us. We appreciate all of your interaction with the accounts, and we absolutely appreciate everybody giving us their, very limited free time to listen to us ramble on. So thank you all so much. We'll talk about this a little bit more next week when we're actually going to have a game to preview. Another short episode, kind of, sort of. We'll have to fill some time because we won't have anything to wrap up. So, let's get out of here on that note. Big shout out to Home Field once again for sponsoring and bringing you the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Home Field Apparel, premium vintage collegiate apparel. Find them at homefieldapparel.com. Follow them on Twitter at Homefield, APPARL. Homefield, wear one for the team. So until next week, Steve, take us out.
Go Tops.
Trace.
Go Herd.
We will see you next week. That's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.